It's the series that makes even the mundane tasks in life feel like they're part of death's trap. Hi, my name's Zach, and today we are ranking all 6 of the Final Destination films from worst to best, which I just watched for the very first time. If you have a video idea that you want to see me do on this channel, you can commission it down below. This particular video was commissioned by Luke Ponto, so thank you so much, Luke, for the suggestion to do a ranking of the Final Destination films. And with all that said, let's get started in last place. And for me, that's Final Destination 5. And being a newbie to this series, I'm not fully familiar with how the Final Destination fandom feels about all of these films, but I do know that a majority of you, based on what I've seen, will be wondering why the Final Destination, the 4th film in the series, isn't in last place, and we'll talk about that when I get to that entry. But for me, Final Destination 5 has kind of felt like where the series was starting to dwindle and start to stretch this idea a little bit too far for me, where it does feel like they tried to do something so different with the franchise because it was the 5th entry, where they aged up the characters a bit more. They did this whole prequel idea where the whole thing is basically so that you can be shocked by the end of the film that this actually ties into the first film, but the road to get there just really didn't work for me. At this point in the series, the Rube Goldberg type deaths that take place in this film, they just feel a little bit lazy for the franchise, where you have a woman who's doing gymnastics and a bunch of events happen where a screw lands on her balancing beam, but they toy with you that, oh, she never hits it, but then she does a flip and folds herself in half. Just over the top nonsense like that throughout the entirety of this movie, where there were some fun deaths in here, like the perverted guy who gets the acupuncture routine and eventually falls off the table and gets all the pins stuck inside him. That was really just like body horror gross to me, especially when he's pulling out those pins and you just see how long they really are. But for the majority of the movie, I just find that a lot of these deaths weren't as interesting to me. They kind of go a little bit more over the top. And being a prequel, they also introduced this new idea where if you take a life, you can earn that life and kind of escape from death's trap, which is something that this series just throws out at you in this 5th entry. But when you find out that this is actually set before the first film, it's like, why didn't Tony Todd ever bring that up in the rest of the films that take place? And even talking about that twist a little bit at the end, where the characters finally get onto flight 180 and they're about to go to Paris, but we know that that plane's about to blow up because Alex and his friends are freaking out as they're being taken off of the plane. I just feel like a lot of that doesn't really work. In fact, the fact that the character on the plane had already gone through his premonition and now he's seeing someone else proclaiming that they're having a premonition, I would think that that guy would listen and get off the plane as opposed to let it just go off. It's a interesting twist. I won't say it doesn't work at all, but it does kind of fall apart in my mind based off of this franchise and what this 5th film has shown me up until that point. So I'm not going to act like this has fallen off the bar of Final Destination films all that much. I mean, these Final Destination films, when you watch them all in a row, back to back to back, they get a little repetitive for sure, and we'll talk more about that as we get into more of this video. But this would be at the not recommendation bar for me, so I definitely would not recommend Final Destination 5, and it's my least favorite that I watched in the series. But not that far behind it is The Final Destination. And the reason that The Final Destination is not last on my list is I just found this one to be a bit more fun than the 5th film. This is where some of the most over-the-top kills happen, where you have a scenario where a man gets his butt pulled out of a pool drain as it's draining the pool, and his guts spew out of his butt through this pipe, which is completely absurd and ridiculous. And it starts to lose that relatability that a lot of these deaths in the series have, which are is when the series is at its most terrifying. But there are a couple scenarios in this as well when the girl is stuck in the car wash. That's a very relatable kind of thing where I go through the car wash. That could have happened to me. Or even when the woman at the hair salon is getting her pedicure done and it has the only moment in the entire series that made me have to look away, and it's this shot right here. Stop digging so deep into her nail. I can't handle it. But then having the eventual outcome being that a lawnmower just hits a rock straight through her eye, I just find that to be kind of fun. There's also a couple things in here where it's just stupid in a stupid way, where I don't really understand why they have to have this absurdly over-the-top racist guy as the first kill. It just kind of feels, for lack of a better word, overkill for this franchise and kind of hitting it right on the nose. When it comes to the premonition in this film at the NASCAR track, I do think that it goes a little bit over the top with some of the kills, but at the same time, this franchise just got more cartoony and more outlandish as it went on, and I think that the Final Destination still has some fun with that, but it also does have that weak element of being a gimmick 3D film, so things are flying at you at the screen and guts are coming out right at you, and it's just one of those things where it's a bunch of CGI blood, it's a bunch of CGI death. It doesn't really hold up all that well, and I do think that the Final Destination has the worst set of characters in the entire franchise, but having the worst, most unlikable characters in the franchise also makes watching them die a little bit more fun. So in a mixed bag type way, I do enjoy the Final Destination more than I enjoy Final Destination 5. I understand why it's at the bottom of a lot of people's lists, but I actually find it to be so bad it's good at times. So for me, it's a weak not recommend, but I still find enjoyment in it. That's going to bring us to Final Destination 3 at number 4. And for me, when I got to Final Destination 3, I felt like they did kind of add new elements into the story that just made it a bit more unique and different than the previous two entries before it. Not only do you have Mary Elizabeth Weinstein as the lead in this, where she is probably the best actor to come out of the Final Destination series. She's definitely given the best performance of anyone in these films. And I like the added addition of where you don't just know who is going to die, but you know how they're going to die. Where Elizabeth Weinstein has these pictures that are able to show her clues of how people in this film are about to die. I think that's a little bit of a fun added element to the mystery. I do think that the characters here are also some of the more likable characters in the franchise. The premonition of the roller coaster is where the franchise really starts to go over the top, which will eventually lead to stuff like in the Final Destination and Final Destination 5, but it's still in a relatable situation and setting. I also don't like some of the more distasteful elements of Final Destination 3, like alluding to the fact that 9/11 was part of Death's plan only a couple years after 9/11 happened. And so while there's still some fun deaths in here, and there's definitely moments and characters that I enjoy, there's also a lot in Final Destination 3 that have a lot of weaker elements in the franchise for me. So for me, this would be more of a weak recommend. I do enjoy this film, but just not as much as the other films that are higher up on this list. Which is going to bring us into the top 3, starting with Final Destination, the one that started it all for this franchise. And for reference, everything here and up are just solid recommends for me. I enjoy the rest of these 3 films on almost all the same levels. But for me, the first Final Destination coming in at number 3 is simply because it is the first of the series where they had this great concept of an idea of these characters who get off of a plane because one of the characters have a premonition that it's going to crash, and lo and behold, it does crash, and now all these characters are on death's list to be picked off one by one. And on some level, I do like that the Rube Goldberg scenarios that Death uses to take out these characters in this first film is more subdued. I think it has a creepier and eerier element to the film than some of the other films in this franchise do. A lot of the ways that the characters die in this are very relatable and easy to imagine yourself in those scenarios as well in real life. I just don't find that a lot of the characters here I get attached to and on board with as much as some of the other characters in the series above this movie. And because it is the first one, after you have the big airplane crash at the beginning of the film, which still looks pretty good to this day, when the deaths get a little bit more subdued and you don't have the crazy bombastic stuff, I just have a little bit less fun with this movie than the other two films on this list that are higher up. Not saying that this is at all a bad movie. I think it's a very solid start, a very strong foundation for this series, but it is this scarier one than the other films, and I just have a lot more fun laughing at the deaths more than I do feeling bad for the characters and imagining myself in that scenario, which again is the strength and also the genius of Final Destination, and is why it was able to spawn this franchise and is able to endure for so long. So I really don't have much bad things to say about the first Final Destination. I just don't enjoy it as much as the next two on this list. Which brings us to our runner-up, which is Final Destination 2. And there are a couple things for me that make this better than the first film. The first thing would be the initial premonition of the movie, where you've got this massive, huge collision on a highway, which I feel like this is the most relatable of all the premonitions to come in this franchise, because someone like me especially, I am someone who drives highways for my job for a living, so I'm constantly on the highway, and there are log trucks all over me on these highways. So when you see that log truck have a malfunction where the logs fall off and smash through that policeman's car and spill his brains all over the highway, that is something to me that I will think about when I'm driving behind a log truck. And just the relatability factor aside, this first premonition has some fantastic practical stunts and car destruction being done. It looks fantastic still to this day. I like the added twist that even though Kimberly escapes from her premonition, her friends still die. I think that's an added different take on a character getting away from death's plan but still being on his list. I also like that this brings the band of characters together who all were able to escape the premonition, coming together and trying to protect themselves from death's plan. You bring back Clear from the first film to kind of be like the mentor character of these characters, which I think works pretty well. And this is also when the Final Destination started to get more into the over-the-top deaths, but they also weren't going so over-the-top just yet, where you can still have fun with these over-the-top deaths, but still kind of feel the relatable factor to them, where there be the kid who's stuck in the dentist chair, and then that object falls into his mouth and starts to suffocate him. That is probably the most wincing-inducing moment in all of the Final Destination films for me, not only because I hate the dentist, but suffocation is just terrible and horrible to think about. But then he eventually goes outside and just gets smushed and crushed in half by that big falling piece of glass. This one did the best job, I think, of subverting expectations of how people were going to die. One of the best examples of that is the lottery winner who gets trapped in his kitchen when a fire starts and his hand stuck in the sink. You're thinking, is it the fire that's going to get him? Is it the fact that the microwave is going to explode because a magnet fell on his Chinese food? Or is it just simply the fact that his hand is going to get gobbled up by the garbage disposal? No, it's going to be that he does get out of the apartment, gets down the ladder, slips on the Chinese food that he threw out the window at the beginning of the scene, which causes the ladder to fall into his eye. There's just some really smart Rube Goldberg scenarios and situations in Final Destination 2 that I think are some of the smartest of the entire series. And there's also some of the more shocking value kills in this one too, where the lady who crashes the van and gets stuck inside, and when she's got a pipe coming through the back of her seat, and when the paramedics and the firemen finally get there, they bump into the car, which causes the airbag to go off and her head smashes through the pipe. I did not see that one coming at all. Then you got the crazier ones, like the guy with the barbed wire fence getting chopped to a bunch of pieces. Final Destination 2, I just think, found that perfect balance of still having that relatable, intense scenarios going on, while also getting a little bit more crazy and fun with them. So I just enjoy this one more than the first one, because I think they upped it in the right ways. But at number 1, I've got to go with Final Destination Bloodlines. And this is the newest one that came out this year, and it could have some recency bias to it, but all I know is that when I watched these films back to back to back to back, and they started to feel repetitive, and they started to feel like the same movie over and over again, just with different characters and different deaths thrown in there, especially after coming off of Final Destination 5, I feel like this one did the best at sticking to what the franchise is, while also switching up the formula in a way that it needed to feel fresh and unique again, where the premonition that starts off this film took place years before the characters that we're following, and it's telling more of a genealogy story where we're following characters that were never supposed to be born, and death has been taking his time catching up to these characters. I think that that's just a really smart and different direction for this franchise to go. On top of that, they made this a family story, and for me, character and story is the most important for me to enjoy a movie, and I just really enjoyed the characters in this film more than any other characters in the Final Destination series, where I liked the family dynamics, I liked the character interactions throughout this entire film. On top of that, you've got some of the craziest kills that take place in the entire franchise, where you've got a woman who gets stuck in a garbage truck and you see her get crushed to death. That was gnarly. The MRI sequence with Eric was one of the most riot laughing out loud while also shielding my eyes moment I think I've watched in a movie in all of my life. I could not believe what they did with that sequence. It was brilliant from the setup to the execution to the final result of it. I was completely at all. I was gobsmacked. I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe what I was watching. And even start off this film with that big skyscraper sequence where the whole building is falling in on itself, and you've got scenarios of people falling off of the building, falling to their deaths and getting trapped inside elevators. And it was just such a crazy, again, over the top scenario for Final Destination, but also had those moments that kept it grounded and relatable to me. So you have characters that I really like. I think they switched up the story in the right ways, and you've got some really fun kills and deaths here that you come to the Final Destination franchise for. So all those things combined create my favorite Final Destination movie, and for that reason, it comes in at number 1. How would you rank the Final Destination films? Comment down below. Let me know. I'd love to see your list. If you want more horror content, I got more horror rankings right up there. Right down there is also the most recently uploaded video to the channel. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And don't just watch movies, talk movies. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.